I don't think South Africa needs any transformation. We need to develop our country. We don't need transformation for who?
Yeah.
For what? We don't need transformation.
Then
we need development.
Yeah.
We don't need transformation. I'm told that there are 7 stages of grief. So they are going through those 7 stages. So there will be new players who are going to emerge in South Africa. I have no doubt whatsoever.
Well, there's an old saying in South Africa that if Moeletsi won't come to the mountain, then the mountain will go to Moeletsi. And today we've given purpose to that statement. And the State of the Nation is very excited to be speaking to Moeletsi Mbeki in his office. Moeletsi, welcome to the State of the Nation.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
I've been relentlessly trying to track you down and get you on here, but eventually you could run, but you couldn't hide, and here we are.
Thank you.
It is just wonderful to speak to you as I think in so many people's opinions, and certainly mine, South Africa's preeminent thinker of the South African condition. Now, let's get into, before we look at some of the sort of deeper structural problems. South Africa sits with problems on 3 fronts. We've got a political problem, we've got a very serious economic problem, and an international relations problem. The political problem that we're sitting with is that at the last election, voters chose not to give the ANC a majority for the first time ever. And it seems like the party has really struggled to come to terms with the fact that they're no longer a majority party. What do you make of the ANC's behavior to their setback at the elections of 2024?
Well, I don't think it's a political problem. Right. I think it's an advantage for the country. Democracy is about the voters' decision, deciding who is promising to deliver a better life for them. And if you fail to deliver that, they choose somebody else. And that's what happened with the ANC. The ANC has been in power for 30 years, and it has been promising that it will improve the economy, it will improve the lives of all the citizens in South Africa. And what it really improved was the lives of the Black African middle class rather than of all the citizens. And eventually the voters wisened up to that and caught up with the ANC. So it's not a crisis. It's actually a good thing.
Yeah.
It shows South Africa's democracy is working.
And it does, yeah. I mean, when I say crisis, the crisis I'm referring to is that certainly within the party, they seem to be, it feels like a good thing for the country, but certainly for the party, they seem to have no mechanism to deal with their loss of the majority.
Yeah, yes, I'm told that there are 7 stages of grief. So they are going through those 7 stages. And I think the DA is helping them to manage their grief. But,
yes.
I don't think we as citizens, we voted and the citizens have decided they've given the ANC a chance over a 50-year period. They have failed. And that's the end of the story. We move on.
Do you think you're talking about those 7 stages of grief, which I know there's a whole lot in there, but one of the ones near the end is acceptance. Do you think that some of the actions recently explain the fact that they may be getting closer to acceptance? In firing a minister for the first time at the behest of other people. We know that the ANC would never move on firing somebody who the country once fired. This is the first time that as I can see it, that it's ever happened. It was usually done for internal purposes. But do you think this shows that perhaps they're starting to accept the fact that they're no longer large and in charge?
Yes, I think so. And it's good for everybody. The sooner they accept that, then they cooperate with other political parties.
Yes.
Not as big brother as they think they are, but they cooperate for the benefit of the country's welfare.
Right. So, and of course, we're going to have a big discussion around the economy and some of the problems there. But I want to just talk about our international relations issue, because that's come into light with the US now imposing sanctions, and there's an act going through their Senate to potentially sanction the country and so on. But is this just a US problem? Is this just a Donald Trump problem? Or do we have a genuine international relations problem?
I think it's a US problem. And I think it's mainly to do with the ANC and the Republicans. It's not real. There's no problem between South Africa as a country and the United States as a country. We have more than 600 American companies doing business in South Africa. I have never had them complaining about, being discriminated against or being treated differently from anyone else. And there are many American citizens who live in South Africa who are in our universities, in our private sector, in our NGO sector. So it's not a problem between South Africa and the United States. It's the mismanagement of foreign relations by the ANC. And it's one of the many mismanagements by the ANC during the last 30 years. So it's not the only, it's one of them. There's been mismanagement of the railways, there's been mismanagement of South African Airways, there's been mismanagement of electricity supplies, mismanagement of relations with the Republicans, with the United States. So there's a whole lot of mismanagement, and the voters have had enough of that. And so hopefully Mr. Trump will also calm down and realize that the ANC is on its way out and start talking to people who are the people who are going to replace it. All the people are going to replace it.
Now, you obviously come out of the party, you come from being very close to that environment. This mismanagement that you talk of across fronts, what has been the major contributing factor to that mismanagement, in your opinion?
This is a very big question to answer. Okay, but I'll give you a short version. The ANC really was a party of the African middle class. And the African middle class started to grow in the middle of the 19th century with the British. They were partners with the British. And that's where they started. And the British gave them a vote. We had a democracy in South Africa in the Cape. So the African middle class was growing from the middle of the 19th century. And then the British, when they discovered the diamonds and the gold, started to go cool on developing the African middle class and very hot on cheap labor in the gold mines and in the diamond mines. And so they did a deal after the Anglo-Boer War in Vereeniging with the Afrikaners, and they said, you run the country, we will collect our profit, and goodbye to our old partners, the African middle class. That is the simple story of what happened. So the African middle class has been bitter against the British. They set up their own organization called the African National Congress, and they wanted to be in power also because they were close to being in power in the 19th century. So when they eventually got into power, they said, wow, this is our turn to eat. Not our turn to work, it's our turn to eat. And they have been eating since then. And that is, in a nutshell, they never focus on building the country, on developing the country. They focused on making up for the lost time in terms of eating. So that they wanted to catch up with the whites, with the standard of living of the whites, and that's what they have been doing. So there's nothing mysterious about this problem. It's a deep psychological problem, but to be expected. That's what was going to happen. Once they got hold of power, they were going to use power to make up for lost time in terms of eating. And that's what they've been doing. They've been making up for lost time. In the meantime, the productive capacity of the country has, of course, been declining. The country has been deindustrializing. The railways have not been maintained. No new power stations were being built. So we were running out of electricity. But the middle class were doing very well. The African middle classes have been doing very well. They're paying themselves fabulous salaries in the public sector. So they have been doing very well. But of course, the economy, there was this mismanagement. And as I say, they mismanaged everything, including our international relations.
Okay. And we're talking about a very small number of people as a percentage of the population of South Africa.
Yeah, of course.
I know some figures you came out with. They form less than it's probably a couple of percent of our population that are benefiting from the current system.
Yeah, if you take the whole top layer of our society, it's 12% of the economic active. That's including all races, yes, including all owners. So the African middle class in there is a pretty small part of that. Yeah.
So, if we now move on to the real sort of issues and where South Africa finds ourselves, we find ourselves with an economic stagnation. You mentioned deindustrialization. You mentioned all of the things that sit, right now we couldn't really manage growth because we don't have the electricity to have growth. So it's hard to see how we get out of our current position. What would be some of the first steps that we would need to take if South Africa were to start addressing some of our major problems?
Well, we have short-term steps that we need to take. There are medium-term steps, there are long-term steps. In the short term, we have to go green. We have to go get out of coal. We have to phase out coal, phase out the coal-fired power station, and move to green energy. That's what the whole world is doing. But we're still hanging on to the coal-fired power station. So in the short term, we have to move out and go. England, for example, which was a huge coal producer for the last 200 years or more, no longer has a coal-fired power station that is working. They've moved to gas, they've moved to nuclear, they've moved to also all sorts of green energies. South Africa should be doing that now in the short term. So that is the first step, short term, that has to happen. But at the same time, we have to restructure our education system. Our education system is a 19th century colonial education system. It's not fit for purpose. The result of this is that there are no new businesses that are being created in South Africa. If you look at India, if you look at China, if you look at countries similar to Vietnam, there are new businesses that are being created both by local investors and by foreign investors. In South Africa, there are no new businesses that are being created. That's why our economy is at a standstill. So we have to remove all these obstacles. Energy supply is one of them, so we have to address. Logistics is another one. We have to sort out our logistics. And then our skilled labor, we have to be serious about restructuring our education system to give us the skills that today's industry wants, not the skills that industry of 200 years ago wanted.
Now, there's also talent management. Yeah, we've got through some of the measures that were taken to make South Africa a little bit more equal, that a lot of our best talent is either being sucked into big corporates or into the state.
Or emigrating.
Or immigrating, yeah. We just keep quiet about the immigration in South Africa, which is a massive problem.
But we have a massive problem of losing our talent to emigration and then directing our talent to state employment, which is not productive. It's not productive employment. We need our talent to go into building new businesses, new enterprises, and so on. and to stay at home and not go to New Zealand and to go to England and what have you. We have to keep our talent at home because it costs the society to train the doctors who are now going off to work in England or work in Canada, the nurses who are now working in the Middle East. We have paid for the education of those people, but they are now working in the Middle East. So we have to create the environment for them to feel comfortable that there is a future for their children, that this is their country. They don't have to be wandering all over the world looking for becoming refugees in America, for example. I mean, what nonsense is that?
Yeah, it's great.
You know.
There's also another sort of discussion, and does it ever happen that when we look at the flow of our professionals, and I think it's got to be, there's never really been an acknowledgement that it's no longer, there was a time when you spoke about professionals leaving the country, that everybody's vision in their mind was of white professionals. This is now spread across
it's across
the board.
All races.
The interesting thing that I find is that those professionals that are leaving the country are not going to the countries that we are trying to copy. We are trying to copy, I suppose, a Venezuelan, Cuban kind of model in South Africa. But these professionals are going to countries that are highly free market, very competitive countries. They're not going to the countries that the government has framed the country as. Why do you have this mismatch that the government is trying to turn the country, into something that the people clearly don't want?
Well, it's not the government; it's
Right.
the ANC.
Okay.
When it was the government,
Right.
well, it's no longer the government. So I don't think we have that problem anymore.
Okay.
It's no longer the government. The voters have said, no, this guy. There's a mismatch between what the voters want, which includes these professionals who are going to work in New Zealand or Australia or America or wherever. And they've said, we've had enough of this, and we want to move in a different direction.
Now that government, as you point out, is no longer the ANC. But there's been this really antagonistic environment within the government of national unity, right? Where it seems like the ANC have done everything in their power to get the DA to leave this government of national unity. What could those GNU partners do? Do you think they're doing the right thing by hanging on despite all of the abuse at the hands of the ANC?
Well, I think the ANC is hugely humiliated.
Yes.
For Cyril Ramaphosa to be president of South Africa, for Paul Mashatile to be deputy president of South Africa, for Thoko Didiza to be the speaker of the National Assembly, they had to be elected by the DA. The voters had rejected them. They depended on the DA to put them in power. So they are very resentful of the DA. So they resent this new lover who put them into power. They feel angry. So it's one of those grief stages. I don't know which stage they are at, but it's one of those stages. They are very bitter about their dependence on the DA. They are very dependent on the DA. They couldn't pass a budget without the DA. They couldn't. They had to get rid of the Minister of Higher Education because the DA said this person is corrupt, incompetent, and insulting to members of parliament, to our democratic institutions, which was true. I mean, she was sitting in parliament, eating fat cooks and drinking. I mean, what kind of behavior is that? But the ANC is going, as I said, through these stages of grief. So the DA has to manage this. Instead of getting worked up about it, it must realize that the ANC is going through these stages of grief, of losing power. It must manage, the DA must manage the grieving of the ANC instead of and realize it for what it is. It's not a war.
Yes.
It's a defeated person who is grieving. So they must, for the stability of our country, they must manage this grieving ANC, you know, to try and calm it down, to accept that the past is past and the situation has changed.
But I would say many within the ANC, and you've seen this, one of the ways of lashing out at the current situation is to say there is an alternative. You can put the band back together again.
They can't put it's the voters who rejected
the band. The band that we refer to is to get the old breakaways back together again, i.e. Mkhonto we sees where EFF, together with the ANC, got a clear majority. Then we don't have to have the DA holding us to account.
No, but they broke away because they disagreed with the ANC.
Yeah.
They were, like the DA, they were disagreeing with the ANC. So again, it's living in cloud nine, in an imaginary world, to think that EFF and MK Party support the ANC. They don't. If anything, they are more bitter against the ANC than the DA is. The DA is not bitter against the MK Party, and EFF are bitter against the ANC because it kicked them out. So if the ANC brought them closer, it's like taking a snake and when it is feeling cold and putting it under your blanket, it will bite you afterwards.
Yeah.
So EFF and MK Party will destroy the ANC if the ANC brought them closer to them, because they are very aggrieved about how they were treated by the ANC.
Let's look at some of the structural problems that we've got in South Africa, because and you have done analysis, and it's South Africa pays more to our public service than any comparable country. Just go into that a little bit more.
Well, we have what I call rule by the African middle class and organized labor. They are the rulers. So before them, let's look at the apartheid regime. Nobody wants to talk about the apartheid regime. The rulers during the apartheid regime were mainly farmers. So the farmers used their power to make their farms profitable, right? So in order to make their farms profitable, they use the state to build an infrastructure like the railway infrastructure, the silo infrastructure, the education, veterinary education, education for the farmers to become better farmers. So they use their political power to make their properties profitable, and in the process, they created the infrastructure that we now have in South Africa. So that's what the previous regime, that's what motivated them. And they made profit. They used cheap labor, all those bad things, but they created an infrastructure for South Africa. I remember them building the national motorway. But that was to make their businesses profitable. Yeah. They built the new port in Richards Bay, in Saldanha, here, there, and everywhere, to make their businesses profitable.
Yes.
So they left the country with that infrastructure. The new rulers, which is organized labor and the middle class, don't have any assets. So they live off the state. So they use the state to give them a high standard of living. And their role model for a high standard of living is the whites. They're looking at the high white standard of living. But they don't understand what made the whites in South Africa have a high standard of living. It is totally artificial, because the white standard of living started with our mining industry. When our diamond mines were discovered, the Afrikaner and the Africans couldn't mine, the native population, both white and black. They didn't have the skills to mine. So they had to go to Australia, they had to go to Cornwall to go and get the miners from there. They had to go to the United States. They had been the gold rush in California. So they imported miners. But now these miners who they imported, they saw this as a hardship assignment. So they wanted higher pay than they would get in Cornwall. And that's how the white standard of living in South Africa was created, by bringing these guys from abroad into a hardship assignment. So you had to pay them higher than they were earning in the United Kingdom, higher than they were earning in the United States. So you have this artificially high salary for professional classes in South Africa, which comes from that background. That is totally artificial, and you could maintain it while we were dependent on minerals that nobody else had, like gold or platinum. Nobody had that. We were the only ones, or chrome. We're the only ones. Well, now the gold is being depleted. The Chinese are now making diamonds in their factory. They are making through synthetic diamonds. But the wages of the top end of our society are still staying high up. They have to come down.
How do we get those wages of the top professionals in South Africa? How do we lower that, normalize the prices?
Yeah, how to normalize so that the wages of our professional class must be the same or similar to those of our key competitors. Our key competitors today is Asia, is China. The jacket that I'm wearing is probably made in China or imported from China. So for us to be competitive with the Chinese, our salary structure has to be similar. And the Chinese produce huge volume of skilled people. I was reading somewhere that in the last 30, 40 years, at any one time, there were 1 million Chinese studying outside China, leaving aside those who were studying in China. So China produces masses of skilled workers, of skilled professionals. We have to do the same, because that's what keeps the price. That's elementary economics. To keep the price down, you have to produce huge quantity. We have to do the same thing in South Africa, and that will bring down the price of our professionals, of our skilled labor. It will eliminate the heritage of the white standard of living.
Yes.
And then our economy will become competitive. So you actually don't lose anything. People think it's a zero-sum game. It isn't a zero-sum game. There are huge benefits when you have a competitive economy, instead of what we now have, such an uncompetitive economy that it is deindustrializing. Now everybody loses in that situation.
But of course, the conundrum with that is that you then need a situation where the current elite class doesn't want that competition in, because they feel they're going to lose that privilege. And if they break down some big mansion and build a high-rise building, it's your mansion that they're breaking down. Therefore, it's just easier to keep the status quo, isn't it?
Well, fortunately, we have a working democracy, and the voters have said to the current elite, goodbye.
Yeah.
So and the DA has to stop propping them up, this current elite. The DA is propping up this current elite. It has to tell them, okay, we'll keep you temporarily while we're working on becoming a majority. In the meantime, these salaries have to come down.
Yeah, but in many ways, the DA represents the other side of the same coin, which is the rich, the middle-class white population. So they also have a vested interest in keeping the salaries high. So I suppose that's the conundrum. Do you see any party out there that actually represents a break from this damaging history that we find ourselves in?
No, there isn't.
Okay, so
This is our sad state of affairs.
right.
Is that in the here and now, it doesn't mean there will not be tomorrow, but in the here and now, there isn't. All these little parties that I imagine, they want to join the gravy train. None of them has said we must restructure our economy. No, they say we want in on the gravy train. So vote for me so that I, Rise Mzansi, or Build One South Africa, can be like the ANC, like the elite there, and have a wonderful life.
I always liken those parties to what I saw as a youngster when the United Party was still the opposition party to the National Party, and eventually at one election they had a slogan of apartheid with justice, which is the most ridiculous statement. And it looks like some of these new parties are like, we will do what the ANC is doing, we'll just do it nicer.
Yes, we want, there was a slogan in Eastern Europe of communism with a human face.
Yes.
That's what Dubček, if you remember, this gentleman in Czechoslovakia, but that didn't impress the Russians.
Yeah.
So they brought in the tanks and crushed the whole thing.
Now, in addition to not having a sort of a new idea for the economy, we've actually gone almost in reverse, where we have really damaged some of our more sort of smaller towns, our rural areas. That kind of infrastructure has really paid the price for this grab of money, by business and political elite. You mentioned about an urbanization plan, which is obviously something that we should have. Do you want to expand on that? Do you want to tell us about it?
Yes, we have, for example, 30% of the South African population living in the former homelands. Now, why were those people in the former homelands? Why are they stuck there? Because to set up the mining industry, there was a migrant labor system that people like Cecil Rhodes developed. And so it locked the families into the countryside. So that's where that came from. But it destroyed peasant agriculture. So those people were not productive. So they are locked into the countryside, but they are not able to be productive because they don't have the skills, the equipment, the capital, or what you need to be productive in agriculture. So that population is now being looked after through, initially it was remittances when the mining industry was thriving. But the mining industry is declining. So now the taxpayer is financing that population to keep that population, head above water, sort of thing. So that is actually an urban population. The fact that they are living in the countryside is because of the migrant labor system. They should be living in the city, but they should be working in the city. So we have to have an urbanization strategy instead of what is happening now, where they are coming to the city on their own, living in shanty towns and getting in poor health. And so they can't contribute to building the economy of the country. So we have to have an urbanization strategy for this 30% of the population that is stuck out there in the rural areas, because that's the only way they can make a living. They can't make a living where they are now. That's not a viable environment. The viable environment are the cities. So they have to move to city, and they are moving to the city. Nobody's forcing them. They are moving to the cities anyway. But we have no urbanization plan in this country.
Now, of course, this is not a problem unique to South Africa, and certainly in Asia, they've managed that urbanization. The poster child for managing urbanization has been China, creating new cities, expanding existing cities.
Absolutely.
So do you do a bit of both? Do you create new do you revitalize old towns as well as expanding cities? I'm just trying to understand what the best way is.
You have to do both. The existing small towns, for example, our small towns in South Africa are really becoming dilapidated. So we have to rehabilitate those towns, and we have to incentivize new investors, both South African and international, to invest in those towns. And then we incentivize workers to come and work in those towns. So those are all exactly like you are saying, which is what the Asians are doing. The Chinese, the real estate sector in China is a massive part of the Chinese economy. Why? Because it enables the rural population to get jobs in the cities by building these massive new towns, these massive high-speed railways, and so on and so forth, which is the opposite of what's happening in this country. What is happening in this country, the new ruling elite is not building, it's destroying the railways. It's not, instead of building new railways and making them go faster, it is destroying them. It's not maintained. Instead of building new towns, it's allowing shanty towns to build on the edge of every town and every city in this country. It's allowing the road infrastructure, the water infrastructure, the electricity infrastructure to collapse while they tax the rest of the economy to pay themselves these huge, phenomenal salaries. Somewhere it was released that the public sector in South Africa, there are more than 55,000 civil servants, including politicians, who earn more than R1 million a year. Now that is crazy in a country like South Africa to be paying civil servants R1 million and politicians. You know, when you walk into parliament, if the ANC sends you there, or Rise Mzansi, or you just walk crossing the threshold, you earn 1.2 million rands.
Right.
That is a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
That these guys are being paid in order to have a white standard of living.
Yeah.
Now we have to get rid of the white standard of living, not by redistribution, by creating a huge pool of skilled workers and entrepreneurs and so on.
So you've mentioned the word incentivize quite a lot. And obviously this comes through having a plan, management, etc. How do you actually incentivize that kind of economic growth? Is it as simple as tax cuts, or is it transformation funds that the DTIC has in mind?
You know, it's not that difficult.
Right.
What we have now, we incentivize young professionals to become civil servants, to go and work for parastatals, to go and work for big corporations. That's what the incentive system in South Africa. But if we turn around and say, let's incentivize them to set up businesses. First, they have their independence. They have a challenge. We have growing graduate unemployment in this country. Instead of them sitting at home hoping that they will get a government job, we have to incentivize them to start to use their skills to start new business, which means that we have to provide the capital, not as a gift, but as an investment opportunity. So there are a whole lot of incentives that can be provided for them to start to develop their business. If you look at the construction industry in South Africa, construction industry is very fundamental to developing a new economy. It's very because it's a relatively low-skill industry. But if you're building high-rise buildings, you need to manufacture the components that go into the building. You need to manufacture the lift, for example. You need to manufacture the steel that goes into reinforcing the concrete when you are building a high-rise building. You need to have huge electrification of the building. You have to have cables to wire the building up. You then have to have refrigerators. You have to have stoves. You have to have all those are manufactured products. So you create jobs in doing so. So these young people, instead of them sitting at home, they can start companies to make refrigerators. They can start companies to wire the high-rise buildings, and so on and so forth. You provide the incentives for them to be able to do all those things. You know, a high-rise building is a massive industrial undertaking which employs huge number of people to build it. And that's what we should be doing. That's what China is doing. That's what Vietnam is doing. We should be doing the same. But building these little pondokis called RDP, that doesn't give us the industrial capacity by building with these 3 or 4 room things. We need to build modern high-rise accommodation for the urban population in the country.
And with that goes a whole lot of other services.
Huge number of services.
Including, for example, safety and security.
Safety, security, the architects, the quantity surveyors. So now they have jobs.
Yes.
So that's what I mean by we have to incentivize the population.
Yeah, it always strikes me that sometimes the one thing politicians don't understand about economics is that, and you made a telling point about the fact that South Africa and the US started to industrialize at a similar time. This is an old economy, except that we were set up to mine and send minerals in raw form overseas, whereas the US developed the other industries
they still mined.
Yes.
But they made, if you go to the Ford Motor Company, just as an example, the first factory that Mr. Henry Ford built, first he built a steel plant next to where he was going to build a factory, because he needed the steel for the he didn't export iron ore like we are doing.
Yes.
He built a steel plant.
Yeah.
And that employs huge number of people.
Yeah, certainly an incentive would be to create an environment, as I see it, where people want to live next to their money.
Yes.
That's always the downfall of countries that don't develop, is that certain factors are missing, like safety and security and quality of life. Right. And therefore, I'll live here temporarily in my barricaded home, but my money will be in a safe haven. Somewhere else.
Which is what has happened. What is happening to South Africa.
Now, certainly there's a big argument at the moment around black economic empowerment. It's now got to the stage where it's being, from being bright talk to being brought up even in Parliament. Do you think there's a future for that, or how do we handle the thorny issue of transformation?
I don't think South Africa needs any transformation. We need to develop our country. We don't need transformation for who? For what? We don't need transformation. We need development. We don't need transformation.
So it's the growth it's the economy that matters way more than the people that run the business. It's the high rise more than the person who owns the project.
Yeah.
As long as you sort of abide by the laws, that's the way to go. So in closing, right now we're sitting here with all of these problems, but there's been a political change. We don't necessarily see the right movement party understanding this whole idea of all of the things that we discussed. Do you remain hopeful about South Africa? Or do you think that nobody is prepared to tackle the really big issues?
No, I think South Africans can see the big issues. And we will have new vehicles to tackle the big issues. The fact that we don't have them now doesn't mean we will never have them. We are going to have new vehicles. The ANC in 1912 was a new vehicle to tackle the issues those days. And eventually it got there in 1994, and it was tackling some of those issues. And it started off on a good footing, tackling something went wrong somewhere along the line. And so there will be new players who are going to emerge in South Africa, I have no doubt whatsoever.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there we go, a great synopsis of the situation in South Africa, as well as solutions. We need to develop our human capital along the same way that countries that are succeeding in the world, and there are countries like Vietnam from the depths of war, South Korea, Japan, China, and it's not only in Asia where countries are getting their act together. There are starting to be places emerging in Africa that are starting to do something similar, but on a smaller scale. We remain hopeful if people would listen to somebody like Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki. Mr. Mbeki, thank you so much for giving us your time. It's been wonderful. And to everybody that watched us on the State of the Nation, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. Mr. Mbeki, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.